Welcome to Public Safety Committee meeting. I'm joined by my colleague, Councilor Penyawa, Councilor Nave, myself, Councilor Majuk, and Councilor William. I'm also joined by Chief and Lieutenant
Sergeant Wells.
Sergeant, and then members of the SPD as well. And we are here to talk about two topics. One topic is to review the policy around the drone use. The other piece is to also talk about the updates around ATVs. So, Chief, take it away.
Is that right? Can you hear me?
It should be
Okay,
working.
good.
Yeah.
So, Councilors, thanks for allowing us opportunity to present our policy clarification. We sent you the policy a couple weeks ago. It's updated a little bit, but it's only like a small word here and again. So we can supply you with these minor tweaks in the policy wording after the meeting. I'm going to have Sergeant Wells do most of the explaining because he's the expert in this. He knows more about this in his sleep than I know awake. So I'll defer to him for any questions. But we're really close to having a final policy. It's going back and forth, like I was just saying, for minor tweaks. The intent and the meat of it's not changing. It's a word here and a word there that we're tweaking. But I anticipate that'll be completely finalized within a week. No major changes.
Can you just run down as to why we are doing this so that maybe the listeners, those that are tuning in, can also understand why the SPD is looking to use drones?
Yes. All right. So this is something that came up, I think a couple years ago. We've been looking at this. We got invited to a demonstration up in Oswego. County sheriffs had a display. I wasn't able to attend. A couple other chiefs did attend. And the whole idea here is to, with shrinking resources, is to supplement our workforce and to save time, and which will allocate more time for the officers to respond to calls that they have to respond to. So in other words, one of the objects of this program will be to eliminate calls that we don't even need to go to, right? Your lower priority calls. If you get a call that there's a loud party in Schiller Park and you could send the drone over there and there's nobody in there, we're not going to send a cop, right? Or if there's a loud music or any kind of small call you could think of. But also on the large, very important calls, right? There's a man with a gun on whatever street, Fayette, Salina. We could send a drone over there to take a look to see if there is, in fact, a man with a gun, and if he is, what's he doing with that gun, or is it a gun? Those types of things. Anything else that you could explain? Feel free to jump right in there.
Sure. Recently, with Syracuse Fire Department, we were called in a couple weeks ago, multiple times in 1 week, to help them both with the brush fire on the west side, where the fire was actually jumping the road and starting to approach the zoo. We were able to put the drone up, and using the thermal imaging camera, we were able to see that there was no longer any hot spots on the zoo side of Grand Ave, right? So we were able to, assist fire with that, put them at ease that a fire wasn't going to spark up again and continue on up into the zoo. As far as the fire up on Court Street's another example recently where we flew for them. We were able to show them some hot spots on the roof of the building. They were able to do a little more targeted, application with their water to try to put out the fire. And we're also, we're assisting them to ensure that the fire wasn't going to spread to an area where they had firefighters on the roof, right? So it's a safety thing for them as well. But those are a couple of recent examples that we've used it for to assist the fire department.
Can I jump in right here before we get into the policy?
Sure.
The scenario that you laid out has a complaint and a drone responding to the complaint. When I think about that, I think about the person making the call. And when they call for the police, they want the police to come, not a drone to come. They might not even know that a drone did come. And while in your world, you might identify that call as being low priority, to the person who picked up the phone, to the person that got to the point and said, I need police intervention, it's not a low priority for them. So how do we address that divide between the public and the public desire, the public want, the public, more than anyone else in the room that your presence can be calming for people who are, in crisis that might have an emergency. So how do we pitch this to our constituents that, again, that want you to show up if they call?
So if there is in fact something going on, if the drone verifies that there's something going on, then we are going to respond. We're going to have to respond to address the situation. This is more for the low priority stuff. You're probably not going to see a cop for 2 or 3 hours. It'd be good if we could get somebody there on scene, maybe eliminate that call from the batch or not. If a member of the public wants to see the police, they can always, and they do have the right and do frequently ask to speak to an officer, to see an officer, in which case that is entered into the call, and then the officer will make contact with that citizen.
I'm not sure the percentage of calls, but I would say a large number of the calls that we receive, maybe even half, are a no complainant type call where they don't want to meet with the police. They just are saying that there's either a traffic issue and they've left the area, somebody's being loud in the area, there's a disturbance, they want it checked out. Calls like that, and to the chief's point, calls like that might wait for a long time for a cop to respond. A drone can be there in a matter of minutes and say it's either there or it's not, right? Being able to be efficient with the drones and handling these calls, if a drone can just get rid of one of those calls, now we no longer have to send a car or two to that call. And then to your point of like a burglary complaint where it's not in progress, there's times where those calls will hold for 8 hours sometimes. And a citizen is waiting, right, for a call. Their house has just been violated, right? Their whole world's kind of turned upside down. And instead of waiting for 8 hours, if we can clear off some of the calls, some of the lower priority calls that cops might get sent to right away, like a disturbance that ends up being nothing, if we can clear something like that with a drone, maybe we get to that burglar a little sooner, right, where a citizen's world's just been turned upside down.
And I can kind of see where that use of drone in that perspective could be effective, especially around low staffing, right? It can to your point of efficiency. However, to Councilor Williams' concern, customer service, quote unquote, it's just as important, in terms of building police community relation and being able to find a balance between efficiency and actually making customer service also a priority, right? I think that balance need to probably explore a little bit more, especially in the used when the time comes. So maybe put that into consideration as well.
Yes, sir. And that's why I started with, mentioning that a large number of our calls are calls with no complainant, right? Like those are the calls where a drone's going to go to and clear it without a cop ever talking to somebody because there's nobody there to talk to. That's going to afford us the opportunity to send cars to a call where somebody does want to meet us and have a face-to-face. If somebody ever wants to meet, it's one of the questions that a dispatcher asks when they take a call is, do you want to meet with police? Every single time. So if somebody says that they want to meet with the police, they will absolutely get a police officer to their house or to the location of the call.
And can you walk us through a couple scenarios in which a drone could potentially respond and, as you're talking about, clearing that call for y'all, what would that look like and what is your threshold? What are you looking for? What are the criteria by which you evaluate a situation from above?
Anything where there is going to be a public safety issue or a property issue, somewhere where we can help clear a call that is waiting from dispatch, we're going to try to send a drone to that. That's the way we're going to pick up efficiencies. An example that I believe I gave last meeting, there was a person jumping in and out of traffic on the west side of the city over by Skunk City, the Wegmans there. Gentleman was jumping in and out of traffic. There was no complainant. They didn't want to meet with police, but they were concerned for this person's safety, jumping in and out of traffic. We had heard, myself and Lieutenant Williams had heard them try to send cars multiple times, but then another priority would come in, something higher priority than that call. So cops were getting redirected and not addressing the person jumping in and out of traffic. We were able to send the drone over there and see that the person was no longer in traffic. There was no traffic issues in the area whatsoever. nobody wanted to meet with a police officer, we cleared that call. So I think that's a perfect example of how we could do that. No longer are we sending a police officer, but nobody also wants to meet with us. So we were able to clear that with the drone only.
In that example, I'm not sure that I recognize the efficiency if you weren't going to be sending someone to respond anyway until it, got down the priority list.
Well, we were trying to send cops there. So once the cops get sent to that call and they arrive on scene, something with a higher priority may go out and they're kind of stuck there trying to do an investigation. It may be for only a few minutes, but they're tied up. That's time that they're spending on that call at that location, right, where they could be going to take another call instead.
Or it could get flipped around the other way too, right? Like, it's just a suspicious person, you put the drone up there and you're going, hey, it looks like this guy's trying to jump in front of a car. Now they just elevated that to a higher priority and now somebody's definitely going. So it could work either way.
When I have had conversations in public over the last couple of weeks, I really find a fairly nuanced conversation. I think that people in the city who I've talked to want to balance, the job that you all do with their civil liberties. And it's really been, surprisingly robust, the way that people engage with the topic. Typically when I hear people being in favor and speaking in favor and, touting the assets of a drone program, they talk about the person with a gun in Thornton Park. They don't talk about the noise complaint. And so I think that there's a misalignment between how you all think that the program could benefit the city and how the residents view the benefits of a drone program. And I'm having a hard time with that.
So, just like any other call system, the high priority ones are going to get the priority. So if there's a man with a gun call, we're going there. Now, if there's not a man with a gun call, but there's just no officers available, and then you can start entertaining the lower priority ones. You clearly have to prioritize no matter which way you go. So the lower priorities, just because drones are first responder, aren't getting priority over high priority calls. You still have to, we have to follow that hierarchy.
Yeah, what I think I mean is that people's acceptance and tolerance for the increased level of surveillance, I think in their brain is aligned with higher level calls, not the lower level calls. And I'm not sure that, the public is ready to engage with that concept of lower level calls as a drone response, because again, for many of our residents, the only time that they think they need the police is when something really bad is happening.
So we're going to definitely do a public education period before we roll the program out. And it's, in surveillance, in my mind, I'm thinking that something we would send somebody up, like a patrolman on patrol, who's walking around, he's surveilling things that are going on around him, and then he responds to a call. We're not going to use the drones to send them up for that type of surveillance, to see what's going on. Hey, is there anything over? It's only going to be responding to calls. Either a call through the 911 system or a call from a police officer saying that they need it.
What about calls that you may receive from, let's say, a household, that there's somebody being aggressive inside the household? I mean, a potential bad situation. You send a drone because there's a call, but does the drone pick up, what's happening inside?
No.
It can't, so then you would have to send police.
No, I'll let him explain the, if it's something you're not gonna be able to see from the street, we're probably not gonna send a drone anyways. I mean, it just makes no sense.
Yeah, there's no audio equipment on the drone either, so
That was my question.
yep. So it won't pick up anything like that. Just video.
Chief, what I'm concerned is about individual rights. We are going to prohibit the use of harass, intimidate, discriminate against any individual. So just to verify this, we're not going to use this we're not going after any individual. If someone has been perceived of doing something wrong, if someone has been perceived who is not an American citizen, someone who might have done something wrong, and we're not going to use it to look at certain people. We're not going to allow federal agencies like ICE to come in and say, we want to see your videos or drones. We might have someone suspicious. Okay? I want that verified, that ICE could come in, like we heard somebody on Westcott Street, that we're not going to cooperate with them because you're invading individual rights and liberties of a citizen. And we're not going to use this at all to invade their privacy. Can I be assured of that? We're not going to mishandle the use of our drones for anything else. That if a person sees a drone and gets scared, they feel that, oh, they're coming at me. You know, these are real human beings. We see what's going on. Children going to school, getting on the bus, going home, and have that fear of seeing the drone and thinking maybe they're going after us. So how can we assure people, you know, we're not going after you?
So the department already has a policy that's very clear on how we work with the immigration officials.
Okay.
And so the policy applies to everything, including the drones.
So that includes that prohibited use that you have documented here?
Which page are you on, sir?
Well, right here on this page 4, prohibited use. Okay, we're not gonna-
606.7.
Yeah, so to target a person based on characteristics.
Got it, Chief?
Yeah, no, I got it. So,
Prohibited use.
yep, the first bullet point is what I was talking about originally, is that we're not going to do random surveillance. You'll be responding to a specific complaint, so that covers that one. And this other second bullet point that's ingrained in all of our policies, right? We can't target anybody based on those enumerated characteristics right there. It's against the law.
Okay,
we
it's
don't do
against
that.
the law, even though there's some in federal government who believe they want to break the law and think that they could come to Syracuse and take it because we perceive this person did a crime. And we got, you know, this is a real thing. And I think people watching this are concerned. This is this is where people complain to me about their rights.
Yeah, now, between this and the policy that we currently have, and I can provide you that if you haven't seen it, it clearly spells out what we can and cannot do with immigration.
Okay, so you're not always going to work with the federal government if you see there's some prejudice, you know?
Yep, we can't target people based on these physical
So
characteristics.
I'm glad because this way where we could say federal government, I think you're overstepping your bounds. And we're not going to go after individual rights. You perceive this person doing a crime. And, you know, we're not going to be part of like a witch hunt, let's say. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Chief, while we are on the civil liberties topic, I have a question around the protection of civil liberties and civil rights. Who outside of the department can vet and audit for the use of the policy alignment of the
I'm not
drone?
sure. Following. So who else is going to look at
So
what we're
besides
doing?
just the department looking at the use of the drone, who else? Is there any parameter
So
established?
everybody's going to be able to see what we're doing with the drones. We're going to, and I think that if we were given the time, Sergeant Wells is going to show you a little bit up here.
Okay.
Everybody's going to know every call we go on, unless it's, you know, like a secret drug operation or something. But any of this drone first responder calls, all the stuff is going to be up on this website. We're going to have to generate an annual report with the flights, what types of flights, why we went on these flights. They'll be available to the public, to common council, to everybody that needs to see them.
Okay.
If there's a complaint about the use of the drones, that can go through any of the normal channels. People can either make a complaint to the department, they can make a complaint to any of you all, they can make a complaint to the CRB, and it will be fully investigated.
Okay. Well, let's get to the presentation so that it might answer a lot of our questions.
Is it tied to the policy, or what's the relationship between
I'm sorry, say that again.
the presentation? So I'm looking at the policy. I'm kind of reading through it now.
Yep. So this
trying
is
to
just
put
a,
all the pieces together.
this is just a website. This is a public dashboard for Montgomery County Police Department. This is their drone as a first responder program. It's all their flight maps and data. So this, I selected this website and this agency because they're using the same software program that we're using, which is DroneSense, which is also Axon Air that we're trying to purchase. So DroneSense will automatically upload all of these flights.
I think this kind of goes to Councilman Joseph's last question.
Yep, correct.
And my response, that this will be available for everybody to see.
So, and you can see here, these are their flights. You can see the thumbnail that shows the route in blue that the drone had flown laid over the map. And it shows the date, time, location, the duration of the flights. And at the very bottom of each of those is the description that shows what they flew for. Sure, thank you. But this is what the public dashboard would look like. If we have flights, they'll automatically get uploaded to a website that DroneSense will design for us and make available on our website.
Now, that looking at that, which is the generic description of the call, it doesn't go into details, or at least synapse of what was done and how it was done. Right?
Yep, and there could be more information gained. Like, I'm assuming that the numbers, the bold print starting with 25, I'm assuming that that's the equivalent to our DR numbers here in the city of Syracuse. So because we're only going to be launching these on police calls, 911 calls, there will be a DR generated for every call. You'll be able to see all the call notes from dispatch. You'll be able to look up police reports if you're looking for more information. But this is just a general, the website is just a general outline just showing the flights. If the public wants to go and see, hey, there was a drone flying over my house, they can go right on the public website and they can see, oh, they were looking for a shoplifter. They weren't looking in my backyard for any reason, right? So there's a little bit of checks and balances there with that.
Yeah. And so when I look at the example up here, and granted, I understand Montgomery County, not here, but I'm just kind of playing with the numbers a little bit. 2:22 p.m., 14-minute flight, meaning took off at 2:22, landed 2:36, on the ground for 21 minutes, back up in the air for another 23. What type of volume would you anticipate if brought to our city in our context? Because that, really, really, really small snippet right there, but that's almost constant activity.
Yep. Can you scroll up on that, sir, please? Just see if there's anything else on that day.
3 o'clock.
Keep scrolling up for me, please.
And then we're to 3:20, 3:47, so about another 20, 25 minutes in between. Then
Next one was about an hour
about
later,
an hour.
roughly.
Yep. But a lot of activity.
Yep. So our plan to start is most likely going to be 4-hour blocks. And we would look to target the times when we have the highest call volume, right? So like the afternoon, noon to 4, 2 to 6 is kind of a high call volume time frame. So we would probably be looking to start around there. Hopefully we can be more effective and help clear some calls, go to some serious calls. But that's how we're looking to start, most likely, to start gathering data. 4-hour blocks, probably a couple times a week, 2-3 times a week, if we can do that, and just start seeing how effective we are.
Hoping to get to where? That's our starting point. And when we talked last time around, I talked about kind of the mission creep. And, we start at point A, and then we end up a little bit further, a little bit further, a little bit further away. And where do we end up? I feel like that's already happened a little bit with the, we're going to use them for high priority calls. And now we've kind of already slid to the low priority. And now if we're talking a couple 4-hour blocks, what is the long-term goal?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think I've mapped out where we could put 5 stations around the city and be able to get to most places in the city. That's not drones on every street corner. That's targeted locations, 1 to 2 on the north side, 2 to 3 on the south side, where we could have kind of a circle around downtown, right? And again, that's if a higher priority call comes in, we can fly the drone over there. As far as mission creep, I mean, we have a policy that strictly outlines what we can fly for
Right.
and what we cannot.
And so we go down the list. We've got page 3, 606.6, A, public safety, hostage situations, right? Absolutely. Mass casualty, lost or missing persons, rescue events, disaster response, explosives, fire suppression, hazardous material, crime scene preservation documentation, search warrant, special events. So where do we get to the low priority calls? Because everything kind of enumerated there seems to be that upper level.
So under Section M, we say anytime a UAS would enhance public safety. In my mind, if we can go and take care of a few lower priority calls to then allow the officers to work more efficiently and more quickly respond to more dangerous calls, right, and get there sooner, then I think we're helping with that.
Right. And, when I think about a policy document and the clarity that I want to see, a claim like any time a UAS would enhance public safety, that to me sounds like kind of carte blanche. You can use it whenever you want because you can always defend under enhancing public safety.
Sure. I don't think we would have carte blanche necessarily just because we're responding to 911 calls. So these are people that are calling for the police to come and show up and assist them. So this is just another tool on us to be able to do our job efficiently and assist the public.
Whereas, out of all the use of drone, I see, as Councilor William laid them out, where does the speeding fit into this?
I'm sorry, the what?
Speeding.
Like traffic speeding?
Yes, traffic speeding. Where does it fit? Or
doesn't.
you don't use it for that?
Nope.
It does not fit for that.
Okay.
If you would be on a pursuit of someone on a traffic in a vehicle, how far outside of the city, do we lose any kind of connection if we go too far out, or does it easy?
Correct, yeah.
It does.
We'll only be going about a mile away in a radius around the launch location, roughly. That could change a little bit. We haven't seen it like in action, but generally speaking, roughly about a mile a radius from the launch site.
I want to go back to the reasonable precaution, and what goes into that, right? Because reasonable precaution can entail that is up to that individual judgment at that time. Now, how do we regulate that? Because if it is left to interpretation, obviously, it would go into a rabbit hole right there. So how do we make sure that reasonable precaution stay on the surface?
So Sergeant Wells is going to be the overall supervisor of this program, and he's going to look at every call that's dispatched and every use of the drone. And if there starts to be something that doesn't look like it's fitting our policy, something that, to your point, somebody looks like they're stretching something where they shouldn't be, then we can handle that internally. But people aren't going to have carte blanche just to do whatever they want. We got the sergeant and then the lieutenant over there will oversee him, and then the deputy chief above that, which currently is me.
So there's always a lieutenant or sergeant in every shift that will make sure that before we send this out, it's run by them, right?
The pilots will be trained on the policy and what they should and should not be responding to. I'll have the checks and balances. It may not be in that moment if I'm not working then, but after the fact, this software program tracks every single flight, and the pilots are directed to put notes in it, just like you see on here, as to what they flew for. So my checks and balances will be, that I'll be able to look into the calendar of the software program, and I'll be able to see every single flight. So there's no way for them, if they're flying through this program, there's no way for them to hide anything.
What would be the ranking of the pilot?
They could be an officer. I mean, there doesn't have to be a rank necessarily. They just have to be a certified pilot through the FAA and then meet our training guidelines.
I think part of what really
I
would...
think, to your point, Counselor, that if an officer is working the drones, he's not going to put that up. If he's on the street and we have the drones in the vehicles, he's not gonna be able to put up a drone without supervisor's permission. But that's not the drone as a first responder. The drone as a first responder, they're gonna be in an office, it's gonna be a small group of people. They've all got licenses to be pilots, right? So it's a significant undertaking on their part to get that license. So everybody doesn't have the ability to just grab this and go with it.
Okay, and in that space where the operator are sitting, there is a high-ranking officer in there
Not necessarily, I wouldn't think so. No.
Okay.
No, I can't work 24 hours a day. That's the only
Right.
problem, right? So
Right.
my general hours are 7 to 3, 8 to 4, somewhere in that range during the day. So I can be around then to monitor the flights. But if we have something like we get busy around 10 o'clock at night, if we have a 4-hour block that people are flying at night, then there may not be a supervisor then. But that's where they'll be trained up on the policy and they'll be trained to what we can and cannot fly to.
Okay, would it be reasonable to ask that, and I know you can't be present working 24 hours. Would it be reasonable to ask that part of the policy that at all times when the use of drone, and the way it looks like the department is going to be using the drone 24 hours, if with the need, of course. Would it be reasonable to ask that to make sure that any time this drone is used, that there is a high-ranking officer? Because where there is much required like this, where there is a lot of responsibility like this, much has to be required. And I think to create that comfort, there has to be, in my opinion, there has to be a higher level of ranking in that space every time it's used to make that decision. And how do we make sure that's part of the policy?
I think if we were going to try to put a high-ranking officer, even if it's a sergeant or above, in that space every time we're running the program, I think it would become cost prohibitive because now you're adding an extra supervisor, or there's not necessarily one needed. There's plenty of supervisors on the road, sergeants, lieutenants, sometimes captains, even deputy chiefs. They're going to be on the road when these calls are being dispatched. You're going to hear it. You're going to know it's a drone call, and so it's automatically baked in that supervisors and high-ranking officers are going to know this is going on.
And Chief, if we don't
Whether
do
in
that,
that room or not.
we run a risk of just letting it be. You know what I mean? I think every shift has has a number of higher ranking officers, right? So what I'm requesting is that with those higher ranking officers, with the use of drone, that part of their responsibility be incorporated, that if there's a use of drone, say 1 a.m, that those higher ranking officers are able to still authorize as if they were authorizing at 10 a.m. in the morning. The risk just run as equally off shift as it would be during the shift.
Yeah.
So we do have some supervisors that are being trained. They're getting their certification through the FAA with the drone program, and they're going to be on other shifts. They're just not going to be a part of the drone program. Like in my position as being a direct supervisor, like a UAS coordinator, they are a supervisor under patrol. They will be getting certified in this as well and trained. So I think to answer your question and, kind of what the chief is saying, we will have supervisors out there that will understand what our policy is and understand what the training is and what is a good use of it. They just aren't in the drone division, right? If that answers your question.
How many are we envisioning to train?
Yep. And Counselor, can I kind of bring what you're saying and kind of frame it in a question that I'm looking for a little bit of clarity? Okay. So we're talking about a policy, right? And so for me, policy is only one component of a triumvirate, right? We're talking about policy, we're talking about practice, and we're talking about procedures. And I believe Councilor Majoke is going to the practices and procedures component of that, of that grouping. How formal will your established practices and procedures be in addition to the policy, because the policy, I can follow it, I cannot follow it, right? And I think that he's looking for the protections to know that our policy is both sound and being followed.
I'm confident that the policy will be followed. He's going to look at every call.
Am I right?
If we get complaints, they're going to be investigated, and some of these complaints might be investigated by the CRB, right? So it's not just an in-house investigation of the policy not being followed. There's other eyes on this, and this is a big deal, and I understand the public concern. So we want to really make sure that, and he's going to look at every call, and make sure that a policy is being followed, and if it takes training and or discipline eventually, then that's the way we're going to have to go.
And thank you for that, Council William. What I'm trying to go at is to make sure that perimeters are established where a room of individual interpretation outside of the policy is limited, right? And if you are able to put in those layers where certain supervision is in every corner, I think that limits that individual interpretation, which put us at a much liability of derailing than anything else. So that's really where I am, where I'm saying that if we are to use a drone, there gotta be some sort of higher ranking in that time period to make those calls. It can't be left up to individual officer at that moment, regardless of their training. There gotta be a point where responsibility is matched with the level of the capacity.
Yeah, so I think we can go back and talk about what maybe just a simple supervisor notification every time to make sure that they understand. I don't know if that's 100% practical or not, but I think we can look at your suggestion that a supervisor be notified every time. I don't know if that'll delay response time, something we need to consider. We can get back to you, but I'm definitely willing to take a look at, if it's a simple notification, hey, Sarge, or hey, Lieutenant, we're going to put the drone up for this or that. That's a simple notification that really shouldn't be that burdensome to make.
How many operators would you need per, let's say, shift?
I'm sorry?
How many operators will you need per shift?
So if we have one drone location starting on the west side, which is our goal, is to start there and just and start collecting data on it. If it's a 4-hour block, it'd probably just be one pilot for it.
You have to be a police officer to apply for this position, or could it be someone in the private?
You'll be a police officer. I don't know if that would change in the future, if we would use an SPO, who would, like a retired police officer maybe.
So it has to be someone in law enforcement. It cannot, someone off the street,
Yeah.
or someone I've been in broadcasting. It is, because we do see a lot of drones around, and outside the Syracuse police office, I mean, Syracuse must have drones. I mean, they're around in the stands. They catch people. They see people. That's right on the video. But what you're saying is you have to be someone in law enforcement. You don't have to be current with Syracuse. You can be state trooper. Am I correct in saying that?
I think it makes the most sense to use somebody with a law enforcement background at a minimum, because then they'll know what calls to fly to, what not to fly to, what, right, like how to proceed. Because if the drone pilot sees something going on the ground, they're going to have to direct resources, right? So having the knowledge of a police officer to know where to direct cops, what direction somebody might be traveling, putting out a subject description, right? Just doing some basic things. I think you'd want a police officer background.
So when we say there's an opening, you're going to emphasize someone with law enforcement. It's very important, because you're not going to have a shortage of candidates who want to work with a drone.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I don't think it should just be anybody off the street.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there interest in developing additional pilots?
Yes. I mean, if it,
I guess from your ranks, right? Are there people within your organization now that have shown interest or that would potentially be interested?
yes, there's a lot of people I think would be interested in it. If we have the need, then we will, reach out and try to get more people certified. And, if it helps us to fill gaps, blocks, time blocks that we're going to be flying, then we'll look into that.
What is a qualification of a pilot?
The city has a COA, which is a certificate of authorization from the FAA. There is no requirement for them to go through the FAA's pilot training program. If you're working for our municipality, you can fly a drone. I don't think that that's prudent. So I'm having anybody who's going to fly for us is going to go through the FAA's testing, so they understand airspace, right? Hopefully we don't have any accidents, right? Hopefully we can mitigate that. And then I'm also developing a training program where we're actually going to be hands-on, and they're going to fly the drones before they can go out and deploy them to a call.
I want to go back. Thank you for that. Since to some extent there's going to be images involved in the policy, is this going to also mirror foil? Because so assume that somebody put in a foil, right? And that foil comes in. How do you filter through to make sure that also privacy is also protected? Because somebody could request a FOIL, but that's going to be sensitive information here. Where do we fall with that? Making sure that there's still that privacy.
So for our current FOIA requests with body-worn cameras and all that stuff, we have software that blurs faces, blurs license plate, will blur kids out of the picture. Whenever we release police reports, I've done this on occasion working with different neighborhood groups, is I'll go through and take out people's social security numbers, phone numbers, home address if necessary. So all that stuff will be done in this same manner.
Okay. And then I want to go to section 6, section 6.8, which talk about the policy around the manual operation. I just wanted to know that you said that if the drone is to be used as a part where it has to be manually activated, right? Turn on. If there was a time when there is so much pressure and somebody forgets to turn it on, to record. I mean, it can fly, but it can't record until you press it to record. How do we make sure that doesn't happen? Because in other departments it does happen, and the results are catastrophic.
It does happen.
Right.
People make mistakes. Our policy, with our body-worn cameras, if you don't turn your body-worn camera on, the first time it's a warning, second time it's a little more severe, and the third time it's a little more severe, and it works its way up the severity chart. This would be the same way. If somebody's, you got to first find out, is it a human error or somebody being careless, or are they intentionally violating a policy? But in the long run, you can't have people that even inadvertently are continually violating policy doing a job. So if we find out that, pilot A, this is the 5th time this week they haven't turned the camera on, probably not going to be pilot A any longer.
What's the logic around automation for it turning on automatically? What's the logic against that?
I haven't used the program yet, so I don't know if there will be an option to have it automatically start recording, or if it will have to manually push a button to start recording. But my training will be that when you launch the drone, part of the launch procedure will be to hit record, if we have to manually do it. As far as the DFR program, like I said, I haven't used the program yet, so I don't know if it will automatically start recording when you launch the drone.
Can I take that same point?
Go ahead.
About on page 4, 6.8. To avoid missing critical evidence during UAS operations, all video will be recorded during flight. As Councilman Joke mentioned, it will be manually activated before takeoff and will stop recording after landing. So, I'm going to bring up the opposite point that I shared my concern with you last time around. From the point of takeoff to the time when they get to the location of the incident, there's a whole lot of people, a whole lot of private property between those two. And now they are subject to, having their image captured between the location of takeoff and the location of the incident. And, that concerns me. And, I would argue that should be, more specifically catered to the location of incident rather than the entire flight.
That's a robust discussion that we had, and my take on it is this, is that if somebody makes a complaint that they're looking in my window or looking in my pool or doing something like that, if we don't have video showing that the line of sight was this way until we got to the, which is gonna be, right, 'cause that's the way it worked. Line of sight's this way, not this way, until you get near where you're gonna be, where in your scenario, you would turn the camera on. We can show that we weren't looking in the pool, we weren't looking, you know, in the park or wherever we weren't supposed to be looking because we weren't on the call. That's the logic behind it.
Yeah, and you know, it's trade-offs, right? At every point in the conversation, we're talking about a trade-off, this for that. And, you know, I think that my calculation, the trade-offs I'm willing to make might be different from those that you all are willing to make.
Understand.
And just so we're clear too, like when we're flying to a call, it's not going to make a lot of sense for us to be looking down at people's properties while we're flying there, just because then we can't see the horizon, we can't see what we're flying at, we can't see if there's a large radio tower somewhere that we might crash into. So we're going to have to be looking up with the camera until we get to the area, right? And then we get to the area where, you know, if it's a suspicious person with a gun, right? Now we start looking down for that person in that area. But when we're flying to the call, like we're going to have to be looking up, you know, at the horizon to make sure we don't crash into something. So if that helps. And then if we're recording everything, if somebody has a complaint and they foil something, they can see exactly what we're looking at, right? So I think it makes sense to record more than less. That way, if there are questions in the future, we can show exactly what we were looking at. If we only start recording when we arrive on scene, then there's a question of what were you looking at up until you got there? Were you looking down at whatever? Were you spying on me prior to your arrival to the call or after the call when you were flying back to the launch site?
So none of this information, this video will be shared with other law enforcement agencies, local or statewide, without the approval of the chief of police. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Chief Cecil has the final say.
Chief Cecil has the final say over all of our policies and
Okay.
procedures.
And they'll run look at, but, okay.
And
you.
there'll be some kind of protocol for them to have access to our data, right?
Yes.
We haven't created those yet.
I mean, there's probably policy out there now about sharing data. I'd have to look into that, though.
So going into the mechanics, in the legislation proposed, this is obviously saying it's a pilot, but is looking at it from now until 2030. To me, that's the time frame is not really a pilot. Pilot usually run 1 year. Is there a way we can create an agreement between the pilot language and the time frame, and then we will revisit this in a year or so, rather than 5 years?
So you want the agreement to
Yes.
say
Rather
1
than-
year with renewals?
Yep, with renewals, rather than 5 years. Let's do 1 year, and let's come back and have a discussion, have that report that you will be publishing and making it public. We can review that together here and see if you know, since that will be our first use, can we up it to 2 years after that, or 3 years, or 4 years? But I think it's critical that we look at that first year data before we commit to 5 years.
Yep, the only thing is, this is the grant to pay for it, but I think I'll work with law to try to bake some language into the letter in the council ordinance that says that we have to come back annually to report or something.
Yes.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree, but you know what I'm thinking about is kind of the proliferation of technology that once the genie's out of the bottle, it's started to put it back in. And so I truly don't envision a scenario in which a year from now we, you know, if granted we pull the technology away, and that's my concern at this point in time rather than looking out into the future.
I wish I could be that strongly convinced, because I think if it blows up and there's a lot of public outrage, I could see you guys having just the opposite reaction of, yeah, we're not renewing that.
All right. Other questions?
Just one quick question. It says here that the retention of the data, it's about 180 days. But if you're using this data to conduct criminal investigations or something of the sort, it wouldn't lose validity after that time.
So once something becomes part of a police investigation, an actual report is written, then, and there's especially if there's an arrest made, then that gets tagged and saved for whatever the records retention policy happens to be. Homicide is forever, other things, it's 3, 5, 7 years.
And then, in your very first 606.4, the program coordinator, it says developing protocols, implementing systems, but it doesn't really specify any of what the protocols or systems will be. Is that something you can at some point introduce?
Well, here's our program coordinator.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this is just going to be, my job, whether it's monitoring the calls we fly to, developing training programs, and developing those standards that our pilots are going to have to follow. It's just a general outline of what my duties will be.
You can give us that information.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why I ask is because sometimes, when we're doing our jobs out in the community, we get asked these questions, and then we just want to be right to, support you.
Yep. No, I mean, I'll have training material that I'll be able to show if anybody wants to see it. But yeah, sure.
I think that will do it for us. I want to thank the department. I want to thank my fellow counselors, and that will conclude the drone conversation. The next conversation would be centered around ATV updates. So let's see.
Thank you.
I will be the first one to tell you that I have absolutely nothing to do with this program, but I'll sit here and answer high-level questions you might have, but Sergeant Blake is the one that has all the intimate knowledge for this, so I'll let him, and he runs the details.
Okay.
We appreciate the candor, Chief.
Thank you.
We didn't do these things when I was in patrol, 'cause I've worked every level from
I've known
police
you
officer
a
through
long
captain,
time.
so
I
Years
know.
you got.
30, I just started my 39th. I just got a congratulation text
39
message
years.
from my only classmate that's left in the department.
Oh, wow.
We had 35 people, and there's 2 of us left.
Congratulations.
Wow, 39 years.
This will be the last one. I'm retiring at the end of this year.